This is the Spokane Soccer Show, proudly presented by Flatstick Pub, and I am your host, Benji Wade. I've missed you, everybody. On today's show, it's just me, serving up only the best vibes about all things soccer in the fine city of Spokane. It's Saturday, July 12th. It's the afternoon. I'm going to have some iced coffee. We're going to be talking about Velocity FC, Zephyr FC. There's going to be several players from the 2023 Gonzaga team that are going to come up in this podcast. So buckle up and let's get started with some Spokane Soccer Show shout-outs. Shout out to all, I think, 70 of you that showed up to the Damned United special screening that we did down at Magic Lantern. I think that was probably one of the top 5 experiences that I've had since starting this podcast. I obviously launched a new podcast for those of you who attended the screening. And if you feel like you missed out, I do want you to feel a little bit bad because, hey, I gave you plenty of warning. I said, we're going to be doing this thing. I got you all fired up. We're going to be watching a great movie. We're going to have Leigh Veidman from Velocity FC talking about the movie afterward. And he didn't just talk about the movie. Shout out to Leigh Veidman. He talked about that movie with his assistant coach, Renato Bustamante. Shout out, Renato. And they opened up in ways that were so honest. It was fun. It was funny. It was enlightening. And it was like one of those things where Leigh Veidman and Renato Bustamante just showed you a lot of their inner workings about the things that they think about as coaches and as leaders of athletes and how they get their athletes motivated and their thoughts about this team that is playing so well in 2025 and they're the front runner now to win League One. I mean, it was really, really cool. I think there were about 70 people there. I think that's the count that I had, and including some of my friends who I just have to shout out because some people thought that they were going to go down and watch this movie and it's about soccer and maybe they're not really huge soccer people. And I think they were worried that this was just going to be a movie that you had to know soccer. And that could not have been further from the truth. One of my friends even said to me, shout out Mitch, he said, 10 minutes in, I knew I was going to be watching like one of the funniest movies. And it was. I'm now obsessed with The Damned United. If you haven't checked out the podcast that I just launched with my friend Luke, it's called All Those Moments. You can find it on Instagram. You can find it anywhere that there are podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple, of course. The main place you should be looking at all of my podcasts, because I'm going very video forward, is YouTube. There's a bunch of clips. I did an interview with Eve Stewart, who is the production designer that worked on that movie. I know I've promoted that a lot through the Spokane Soccer Show Instagram page, but in case you don't follow me on Instagram and you only listen to the content through this podcast, you definitely need to check out this other one if you like movies. It's called All Those Moments. It's a partnership with the Magic Lantern. And the first movie we did was called The Damned United. We had about, 75 people, I think, 75 people. Really, that number is going to go up. There were 100 people. We sold out. It was really well attended. And we got to drink some beer from our friends at Wildland Co-op, the Las Chivas Lager. It was just a great night. I had so much fun. And of course, there will be future soccer movie screenings. I think Fever Pitch makes a lot of sense. How about Escape to Victory with Pele and Sylvester Stallone? How about Bend It Like Beckham? Maybe Kicking and Screaming, The Ladybugs? Kind of joking on those last two. Maybe if I was a kid, maybe we could do like a kids movie, and Bend It Like Beckham's a good kids movie. So thank you so much to the Magic Lantern, to USL Spokane. There were so many players and people from the club that came and watched the movie with us, and we had a great time. And again, pay attention to All Those Moments, the new podcast that I just launched with my friend Luke, for more updates about that in the future. Anyway, I also want to shout out Leigh Veidman because he just received his UEFA A license, which is one level below UEFA Pro license, which I'm sure he will now pursue. And it allows holders to be head coaches of youth teams up to age 18, reserve teams for top flight clubs, and men's professional second tier clubs. So there's this whole thing, right? You can get a license for coaching soccer in the United States, of course, but I'm just being honest, that licensing system is not as well respected as UEFA, which is the European governing body of football, right? And that's the one that Leigh Veidman has. I think he has a US Soccer Federation license as well. I don't remember which tier that he has, but he did receive his UEFA A license, which is one from the top, which is called the UEFA Pro license. So it means that, like Leigh Veidman could technically manage a second tier club in Europe, which would include like any of the championship teams. Don't even think about it. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, you've got Phil Parkinson, you're going to be just fine. But yeah, at that level, the championship, the tier that Wrexham just moved into. So congratulations to Leigh Veidman. I think it's a very big deal. And everybody should add to the dozens of reasons that we're stoked to have Leigh Veidman as the manager of Velocity FC. This is just one more of those reasons. So shout out Leigh. Shout out two-time previous guest of the podcast, Mike Pellicio. Mike's a head coach of Spokane Impact, and that just got announced. And if you didn't catch this news on Instagram, so Nil Vinyals, who of course plays for Velocity FC, and his former Richmond teammate, João Gomiero, they started a nonprofit called Project Inspire, okay? And through this nonprofit, they have created the first ever national soccer league for athletes with intellectual disabilities. And Spokane Impact will be the club that is launched by USL Spokane. And they just named Mike as its first head coach. Mike is already a teacher. He's a coach with Spokane Shadow. He's the head coach of both Shadle Park boys and Mount Spokane girls high school soccer teams. So pray for our boy, Mike Pellicio. When I asked him about it, I said, how are you going to do all these things? He just said back to me, I'm paraphrasing. Give me some license to paraphrase. I'm a loser, just like Benji Wade. I don't have hobbies. I just have soccer. My wife, Megan, will be helping. It's a family event for us, so we will all be contributing to the effort. To learn more about Project Inspire and this new club that was launched by USL Spokane called Spokane Impact, go to projectinspireusa.org. Get involved, donate, learn more. All right, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to shout out the Spokane Shadow women's teams, two of them, okay? So the under-23 team lost their Cascadia Premier League semifinal against Bellingham United. That happened last night. They lost 4-3 despite a goal from friend of the pod, Savvy Briseño. I was watching the social media feed during the night when this was happening, and it seemed that every time Shadow scored, then they would concede minutes later. They were down 3-2 with like a few minutes left in regular time, and then they tied it. But then before the end of extra time, they lost 4-3. Super bummed. But hey, they had a great season, so shout out the Spokane Shadow women's under-23 team. Meanwhile, the senior team lost their WPSL West Region game against SoCal Union today, 3-2. I just actually finished watching that game, and they were down 2-0 in the first 20 minutes. I was starting to get a little despondent, and then right before half in stoppage time, Kaya Lee, Delaney Walker, they work on a short corner routine that led to a shot at the top of the box from Delaney Walker. It deflects to Kaya Lee, who volleys it across the goal. And Kaya's Utah Tech teammate, Ella Cotter, was there to put it in the back of the net. So they go into half down 2-1. And I went from like starting to not pay as much attention because I have so much going on in my house today to, okay, I'm going to be glued to the TV for the rest of this game, which was streaming on YouTube, which is really cool. Good job by you, WPSL. They were so dominant in the entire second half. And then, of course, minute 51, midfielder Quinn Mueller has a hit from the top of the box with her left foot. Keeper spills it, and our friend Marissa Garcia is there with a follow. Cleanest finish with her right foot. She's a left-footed player. Top bins, 2-2. And for the rest of the game, they were so good. And the entire second half, honestly, I was like, this is just a different team. I saw that Chelsea Lee was starting to tuck into midfield. She started off playing a little bit on the wing. She started to play from a much more central role. And they were putting together attack after attack. I think their XG must have been much higher than SoCal's, but I think they just ran out of gas in the final 10 minutes or so of the game. SoCal got the winner in the 93rd minute. So third minute of added time, they got the winner. It was a pretty nice goal, admittedly. But we're going to keep this upbeat because these are shout outs. Shout out for the great seasons that both the under 23 and the senior team had. Chelsea Lee and her sister Kaya and her best friend Marissa, they all probably got to play together for what I assume is the last time on Spokane Shadow. And I just want to say one more shout out, which is kind of an interesting one. SoCal Union's team are coached by now former Zephyr FC midfielder Marley Canales' dad, Rudy. So shout out Rudy Canales. Good job. Why did it have to be against us? Ugh. Shout out Kenny Pierpoint and Rocky Wells. Their Crossfire Premier Soccer team won the under 18, under 19 ECNL National freaking Championship. Rocky, in case you have forgotten, was signed to the first ever Velocity FC Academy player contract recently. Kenny was a guest on the podcast in early 2024. You recall, he's this fantastic goalkeeper. Kenny was just won back-to-back championships because Crossfire won the national title in 2024 as well. So shout out Kenny. Kenny's going to be playing for UW, University of Washington, as a freshman this fall. Let's go, Kenneth. Gonna need some more coffee. Oh my goodness. We've just gotten started. Shout out Best of Broadway Spokane and MJ the Musical. That night was so god dang fun. And shout out Sarah Clifford, my friend who is the director of marketing at Best of Broadway. Thank you for the tickets and for doing the giveaway. That was really, really fun. And of course, I see some Velocity FC players. I'm standing, getting ready to go into the theater, and I see Jalen Chrysler, who is an unmistakable dude. You see Jalen Chrysler anyway, you're like, that's Jalen Chrysler. Nil Vinyals was there. David Garcia saw the winner of the giveaway that I ran through my Instagram page, John Griffiths. Congratulations to John. Shout out to you. That performance was unfreaking believable. If you've ever wondered like what it must have been like to watch Michael Jackson perform in the 1980s, but you were far too young to do so, which would include me, it felt like you got transported back in time to see this like intimate performance of Michael Jackson. That's the way that they did Thriller and Smooth Criminal and Billie Jean. I just not seen anything like that in my life. So by the time this podcast comes out, I don't think you will probably be able to see the show anymore because I think the last performance is today. But maybe that's just my way of saying don't sleep on Best of Broadway. Get your tickets. Go show up for the arts. All right, that's it for the shout outs. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee. We'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk all about Velocity FC and where they're at in the middle of their season. The Spokane Soccer Show is supported by Spokane City Credit Union. And in case you missed it, throughout 2025, I will be updating my listeners about SCCU's commitment to the Greater Spokane Parks Challenge. For the month of July, there is a new challenge. It's like a scavenger hunt. Our friends Gene and Jack have been out exploring, and now it's your turn to follow their trail. Go to sccu.net/parks-challenge, where you'll find clues pointing to 5 different Spokane area parks where Gene and Jack have visited. You pick a clue from the list on the website, you find the park, you strike a pose where Gene and Jack did. You only need to match one of the 5 featured spots and submit your picture by July 31st to be entered to win a $100 Visa gift card. And don't forget about the bonus challenge. Upload a photo of the most scenic view that you have spotted at a local park before July 31st for a chance to win a $50 gift card to Twigs. To learn more and to register for the challenge, go to sccu.net/parks-challenge. Let's catch up on what's been happening with Velocity FC through 14 games of their 2025 season. In case you've missed it, I'll just start by saying, why can't I be a bit more happy? Is Coach Leigh rubbing off on me? So at the Damned United screening, when Coach Leigh was talking about what's happening with the current team, you could tell that he's always got this thing where he's like, we're doing so well, but we could be doing better. And I think it's rubbed off on me. He talked at the event about the wanting to see a little bit more attacking return, a little more aggression in front of goal, and we should be scoring more goals. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, we should be scoring more goals. Meanwhile, and then I go on a podcast from my friend Kyle and Elliot and Ebony, who have a great podcast called Walkin' 90. If you ever never listened to that podcast, it's a great one. They talk about all things USL. And it was just this day, it was just with Kyle. And I realized after talking to him, I'm like, I know I didn't sound very happy. Like, why am I not? I should be ecstatic. Okay. Well, we should all be ecstatic. First of all, we should be ecstatic and we should be going to the games. I don't like where we're at with the attendance. I want to see more than 2,300 people going to these games. Okay. We're top of the table. We have the most clean sheets, the fewest goals conceded. We have a 9-goal differential. We have more points through the first half of this season than we had all of last year. We're tied for 3rd with the longest regular season unbeaten streak in league history with 12. We've only lost 1 game to stupid Naples FC in that dreadful game on March 22nd. So let's talk about how dope this is. All right. One great place to start is that Nil Vinyals goal against Texoma. I know I talked about it with Nil after the game in the post-game interview, but I'm not done talking about it.
Waldeck heads it clear. Lofted along in a mad dash forward, and it's Garcia well off his line. Has tousled back. There's an open net. Does Vinyals realize it? And Garcia now backtracking. Vinyals dashes through. Vinyals! What a goal! It's the veteran! Sensational!
It was a stunning finish. It was the type of goal that you don't see a lot at this, in the third tier of soccer in any country. And it just shows you that the quality of these players and the depth that we have is truly something to behold. It is an embarrassment of riches, and it's going to be the biggest challenge, I think. And Leigh mentioned this again at this event recently, that managing the players in terms of their form, in terms of their happiness, in terms of their fitness. We want to make sure that we go into the playoffs, which is with as much fitness to this entire squad as possible. You want to make sure that you can draw from every weapon at your disposal when you go into the playoffs. So, but meanwhile, we have so much depth. I mean, let's talk about where we're at in the midseason. The league just announced, I don't know how I feel about midseason player awards. It's kind of like, and I have a feeling if I talk to some players from the club, they might feel like, look, we're not going to even pay attention to that. When I talked to Derek after the Texoma game and asked him how he felt about being top of the table right now and where they were last year, he said, it's great, but we're not going to focus on that, which is exactly what you want to hear. So when I talk about these midseason player awards, let's talk about it in the context of being fans that are really stoked about how great things are going and hope that our players are ignoring this stuff and staying focused on the task at hand. But right now, Carlos was nominated for Goalkeeper of the Year, Derek for Defender of the Year, Leigh Veidman for Coach of the Year, and Anwar Pelaez for Player of the Year. All those players deserve so many props, but I think there's many more in addition to them. I mean, I don't see how you talk about Velocity FC in 2025 and not talk about Pierre Reedy. Pierre Reedy is like one of those guys that seems like a physics experiment that doesn't make any sense. It should not be technically or physically possible to do what that player does. When he is running at full steam, no one can keep up with him. Yes, speedy Reedy. And he's basically impossible to knock off the ball. He does not go down easy. He does not try to draw fouls. He gets fouled a lot because players are just trying to knock him off balance, and it's very difficult to do so. I sometimes will watch these moments in complete disbelief. It happened recently. It might have been in the Texoma game. I can't recall, but he was getting bodied by two defenders on both sides and still managed to stay upright. You can't talk about Velocity FC in this year without talking about Pierre. He is the most threatening attacking player on our team and definitely one of the most threatening attacking players in the entire league. So those are my favorite two players of 2025. I'd say it's Pierre Reedy and David Garcia, 1 and 1A. I think that all the form that we've seen from Carlos Merancio, that comfort he has between the sticks, is because he's a fantastic shot stopper, but he is benefiting, I think, a lot in that relationship with David. David is marshaling that defense, especially in the middle, and it's really paying dividends, I feel like, with the entire back line. There was a tendency last year to give up goals on the counter to especially athletic, physically imposing wingers and forwards, right? I talked about this a lot last year and probably this year too, right? We've given up like a couple of those goals. I think the goal that we gave up back post, Lucky lost his assignment or he tracked back and was a little bit late. Those types of goals were happening a lot last year. We've had like two of them this year. So David, Pierre, those are my two favorite players on this team right now. I shouldn't say two favorite players, but those are the teams that I think have been the most important. You can't not talk about Anwar Pelaez, though. I mean, he is finishing the chances that are there, and he makes a lot of those chances. His ferocity and press and his aggression with those short bursts, he's fairly, like, he goes on these like really quick surgical runs in the box, which is what you want to see from a powerful center forward like that. If Nico Brett can start firing with that quick release on the edges of the box and from odd angles, which is kind of where he has earned all those. There's a reason he is the second most prolific goal scorer in the history of the USL Championship. We haven't seen it yet. I think it's coming. And if that happens, I do think this team is pretty much unstoppable. So looking forward to seeing what happens on Wednesday when the club starts playing again. They're traveling to Westchester. Then they're headed to Chattanooga Red Wolves, who have been playing really well, which has surprised a lot of people. And they'll be home again on July 26th, hosting Sacramento Republic FC in the Jägermeister Cup. Sac Republic is a USL Championship team, of course, and that's going to be a really tough game. So make sure you show up and cheer the boys for that one. I also want to provide all of you with a little update about League One in general. If you didn't realize this, there will be at least 6, possibly 7 teams added next year to League One. They include a team that's going to be forming in Corpus Christi, Texas, Eugene, Oregon. I have a lot of thoughts about the Eugene, Oregon thing, but we'll save that for a later conversation. Fort Lauderdale FC, so they will have a Super League team and a League One team just like us. Fort Wayne FC and Sarasota Paradise. Sarasota Paradise, real quick side note, they are in League 2 currently, and they accidentally followed the Spokane Soccer Show at one point, at least by their own admission. The admin DM'd me once and said, followed you by accident, but like your content or something like that. So, hey, they'll be in League 1 next year. That'll be cool. And of course, Athletic Club Boise, aka AC Boise. I think there's some history of like a strong Basque region connection with Boise that I didn't know about. They revealed their crest and their color, and we will have a derby. I don't think you're going to come up with a better derby for Spokane, Washington than Boise, Idaho. I mentioned this on the podcast with Walkin' 90 when Kyle asked about that. It's like Boise, Spokane, if you're a family, if you're a young professional, if you're, I don't know, anybody who's looking to live in the interior Northwest, I guess, or inland Northwest, those are 2 cities that get compared all the time. And I think there is a natural rivalry just because it's Washington, it's Idaho, similar sized cities. You know, let's load up a bus and go down there and raise hell. Last but not least, this is crazy. The New York Cosmos. I don't claim to have an encyclopedic or even Wikipedic knowledge about the Cosmos, but in the 1970s, this is a huge deal, right? North American Soccer League. The New York Cosmos were a team that had Pele, they had Franz Beckenbauer, they had Giorgio Canaglia, Carlos Alberto, 2 Italian and Brazilian, respectively, international studs. They drew these huge crowds. They helped the sport grow a lot in the United States. And then, of course, Pele retired, and all that progress quickly petered out because it turns out that Americans were not interested in the sport if Pele wasn't involved, which is exactly what's going to happen to the MLS when Messi retires. Okay, had to say that. The Cosmos have gone through a few iterations in the last 10 or so years, I want to say, maybe 20 years. Our own Siobhan John Brown played for both their B team, which was in the NPSL at the time in 2019. He then played for their 2020 team, which was their first team, which was in NISA. So next year, Velocity FC will be traveling to Paterson, New Jersey to play the New York Cosmos. I'm going to have much more on that later, I'm sure. All right, that's it for Velocity FC. Let's take one more quick break, and when we return on this special solo edition of the Spokane Soccer Show, I will catch all of you up on my thoughts when it comes to Zephyr FC. The Spokane Soccer Show is proudly supported by Feast World Kitchen. You have heard me say dozens and dozens of times how much I love the food. The Ghanaian jollof rice and the Egyptian sambusas that I had once upon a time at the AFCON watch party. But I want to keep reminding you about all the operational support that Feast World Kitchen needs to make what they're doing possible through their programs. But for all the employees that provide the operational support for their programs, here's the deal. It's not free paying a living wage for all this incredible work. And in our society right now, a lot of that funding that flows to this sort of work is being cut off. I'm sure you all know that if you read the news, right? All these programs are being cut. So instead of just gushing about the food and telling you to eat there, this time I'm asking you to consider making a donation to keep this amazing work going. Go to feastworldkitchen.org/donate to make sure that these chef entrepreneurs have all the support they need to continue serving up delicious food here in our Spokane community. It fills me with joy to announce that Wildland Co-op is a sponsor of the Spokane Soccer Show. What is Wildland Co-op? Wildland is a small farm, it's a brewery, it's a winery, and it's a local goods market. 20 varieties of beer on tap, guaranteed to be something you're going to dig. A range of fantastic wines and tasty non-alcoholic beverages. So pull up an Adirondack chair on their cherry tree patio and take in all those yummy flavors amidst sweeping views of Green Bluff and the foothills of Mount Spokane. There is literally not a better place in the 509 to gawk at the warm, dreamlike skies during golden hour. I've almost run out of room on my phone taking photos of it. That's actually a true story. The Wildland Co-op is family friendly. Everybody's welcome. And if you'll recall, last year, their head brewer, Michael, took me up on the idea of making a signature beer for the Spokane Soccer Show. Remember the Double Pivot Pub Ale? For more information, go to their website or follow them on Instagram, Wildland Co-op. That's wildland.coop. All right, my coffee's gone, which means it's time to talk about Zephyr FC. There's so many updates happening. As you all know, a bunch of our players have left. I don't even have and don't claim to have the complete list right now. I don't think every single decision's been made yet, but these are the departures that we know about from this year. And I'm going to go into many more details about this after I list these players, okay? So Sydney Cummings, particularly tough for me because Sydney's my friend. She was my friend before she was ever announced as a player for Zephyr FC because of her awesome podcast with my other friend, Abby Carcio, which is called Megged. I hope they bring back their podcast, by the way. I give them both a hard time about it, constantly because it was so awesome. And I say that and I'm like, it's hard work doing a podcast that doesn't suck. So their podcast didn't suck and they put a lot of work into it. I hope they find the time to do it again in the future, but Sydney's gone and she just signed with DC Power. So as sad as I am to see her leave Zephyr FC, I'm very stoked to see her continue her career with DC Power. So shout out to Sydney. Kenzie Weinert, Alyssa Bourgeois, and Taylor Almer are all gone and signed with Lexington SC. I'm sure you know that news if you're paying attention. If you're learning it from me, well, let's talk about it. It's really a bummer, but all three of those players were sold as transfers to Lexington SC. They do not disclose the details of the amount of cash that changed hands, but they were all players that were sold because they were all under contract. I've been told this by the club. Kenzie, it hits particularly hard for me because she came on the podcast and I became friends with her mom, Deidre, and her dad, Mike. Wonderful people, but constant theme of this podcast. When a player moves on to some other club or maybe they retire or whatever, we're always going to be supportive wherever they end up. So Kenzie, Alyssa, Taylor, we wish you the best. Of course, there are other players that have departed the club. Marley Canales, Riley Tanner, Julian Valerand, Winnie Balata, Tyron Reese, Jenny Vetter, Alyssa Walker, Jody Ulkekel, all have left the club. That's a lot of turnover, but before we even think about how much turnover Zephyr FC have experienced, let me give people just a little bit of if inside baseball, if you haven't been paying attention to other teams in the league, I think we should expect in the first few years minimally of the Super League, massive turnover. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But right now, I think the percentage is somewhere north of 50%. Tampa Bay just won the title, and then they announced that they had lost like 9 or 10 players. Carolina won the Players' Shield, and they lost 8 players. This league is going to change a lot in its first few years. I would kind of paint a picture like this about what's happening. These players, they're basically blazing a trail for future players. The women's sport is growing so incredibly fast. They are working on new collective bargaining agreement as we speak. And as the league grows, so will wages for all these players. And when you see a player retiring at 28, it's because you can probably make $30,000 a year more as a professional starting out your career, depending on your training, your education, your job skills. So when you hear stories from, think about it like when you heard about players from the ABA or the earliest NBA teams, right? Back in the 60s and 70s, traveling everywhere by bus, not making much money. That's kind of what we're looking at right now, right? Yes, the women's sport is growing. And this applies a lot to Velocity and League One as well, okay? So the reason that these players will sometimes leave the sport early is because it's like, imagine you're 28, you got a degree. A lot of these players went to college and got a 4-year degree, and they learned some type of job skill that would let them go apply for a job at a company out there and, use their job skills that they learned through college or whatever. And they can probably make considerably more money doing that, right? Over time, I think we're going to see less and less recent college players, meaning recent graduates from college, right? Which is a lot of the players that came into the league last year. You're not seeing that almost at all in the NWSL now. If a kid just graduated from college, even the kids that were studs in college, they're not walking right into an NWSL or MLS team. I can tell you that. And I think that's going to end up translating to the Super League too. Over time, there will be less and less recent college graduates, like players with pro experience, whether they played overseas or they've played in the Super League itself, or of course in the NWSL. That's the type of players that I think are going to be more and more prevalent in the Super League. And I think we'll see more loans from NWSL clubs as well. I think you're going to see that more over time. We have signed already one player on loan, and I think there will be more in the future. So these first few years of the Super League, not just the players, but the league itself, all the clubs are going to be figuring things out. So I feel like we should count on a pretty high level of turnover for the first few years of these players. And it sucks. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm bummed out to see a lot of these players leave because you get emotionally invested. And me in particular, from the time that I started the podcast following the Gonzaga team, the Gonzaga women's team, I have been more invested in the women's game for the last few years than I have in the men's game. So these players leaving, it really stung, but I just think it's an indication of where this league is going to be. We're seeing movement from some of the best players from certain teams going to other teams in the Super League. Addie McCain was one of the probably top 5 players in the league last year, and she left Fort Lauderdale and signed with Lexington SC. I'll say some stuff that I've said privately about Lexington SC. In case you didn't know this, the owner of that club is a billionaire and has a lot of money and is paying, whether it's the men's team or the women's team. This is a very not well kept secret. Spends a lot of money. And so Adam McCain signing for Lexington, I've heard rumors that was a high transfer fee. Paige Almendarez, who played for the championship winning Tampa Bay last year, she went to DC Power to join our friend Sydney Cummings. So it's going to be really wild. And I think we should just count on some turnover until this league can kind of find some stability and figure things out, which is just going to be an interesting dynamic to watch between player and club and league. I currently don't know very much more than my listeners when it comes to the players that are leaving the club. I'm currently not aware of any departures that haven't been announced. So the list that I just provided is the only one that I'm aware of. If there are other departures, again, it's not something I'm aware of at the moment. So I just want to say a final thank you from me personally to all the players that played for Zephyr FC in its first year as a club and everything they gave to this city and to the team. I just really want to say thank you for everything that you did, and best of luck wherever you end up in your career next. And with that, I think we should talk about the 6 players that were announced as incoming for the 2025-2026 season for Zephyr FC in the USL Super League. I mentioned at the start of the podcast, we're going to be talking a lot about the 2023 Gonzaga women's team. And here we go. Kelsey Euler has been signed by Zephyr FC. That is the first player's name that I ever mentioned on the Spokane Soccer Show when I did a teaser, a little 2-minute teaser. It wasn't even video, it was just audio. And I had watched the team play. And at that moment, I think Kelsey was on the door of getting the program record for assists, which of course she now has. And this is a really big deal to me. Kelsey started her career with Gonzaga as a forward before head coach Chris Watkins, when Chris Watkins was coach before Katie Benz took over at the program. Coach Watkins converted Kelsey to a fullback. She ended up with 6 goals and 22 assists. Again, that's a program record. She won a WCC title with Gonzaga. If you want to go back and listen to the first ever episode of the Spokane Soccer Show, my guests on that podcast were at the time head coach Chris Watkins, Kelsey Euler, and her teammate Marissa Garcia, who I mentioned at the start of the podcast. Great friend of the podcast, Marissa Garcia. And that player, Kelsey Euler, is going to be playing for Zephyr FC. Kelsey transferred to Arkansas, where she started 19 games last year and had 9 assists there, including 2 in a very sad 4-0 win against Gonzaga. Kelsey was on the Herman Trophy watch list after transferring to Arkansas. I do think she refined her game defensively there, but wasn't involved in the attack quite like she was for Chris Watkins and that incredible 2023 GU team. I thought Kelsey Euler was going to be like nailed on as an NWSL player. I thought that if there had been a draft, I would have expected her to go in the first round. So I'm not quite sure what happened maybe it's just some of the dynamics about the NWSL. I really can't say, but I'll say just a few words about Kelsey as a player, and I intend to do a little bit more of a preview podcast in the coming weeks, but she is absolute hell on wheels as a defender and as a player overall. Her recoveries, her work rate, she has probably the best left foot of a player I've ever seen. Like, she has everything: power, accuracy, rotation. She is an intense competitor. This is a big signing for the Super League in my view. And keep in mind, I haven't seen her play a lot since she left GU, but she is a player. When I remember going to a game with my daughter Ivy, her 90 plus team one morning. This is obviously back in the fall of 2023. And that evening, I knew I was going to be going to a Gonzaga game. And I got to the Gonzaga game early enough to see the players warming up. And Kelsey was taking free kicks and warming up with some crosses about probably 20 feet from me. And every time, she's one of those players where every time she would smack a ball, it just had this pop to it that is just unusual. She just strikes the ball with so much power. So I can't wait for people to see her play. If you never got a chance to see her play for Gonzaga, well, she's going to be playing for Zephyr FC. I have to bring up that another player from that great Gonzaga 2023 team signed for Sporting Jacks, Maddie Kemp. So shout out Maddie. I look forward to keeping in touch with her too and seeing how that goes. All right, let's talk about another player that was announced. Actually, I don't think this player has been announced, but her college announced that she was signing for Zephyr FC. And I'm talking about none other than Tori Waldeck. Now, Tori Zarenberg. Congratulations, Tori. She just got married. And she has signed with Zephyr FC. She is the cousin of Derek Waldeck. I have to talk about this player for just a second. All right, so Tori Zarenberg is a forward who... Let's just start saying this. She absolutely smoked the WCC last year. She scored a hat trick against our beloved Gonzaga on my freaking birthday, a game we lost 4-3 despite a late goal from Chelsea Lee. We ended up losing that game 4-3. She had 38 goals and 20 assists for Pepperdine in her career there. She was a two-time All-West Region first-team player, and she was Pepperdine's first ever two-time winner of the WCC Offensive Player of the Year award winner. She was on the WCC All-Freshman team and the All-WCC first team 3 times and second team once. And I'm just going to be very curious to see, with the type of production she had as not just a prolific scorer, but also a playmaker, can she play the 10? Can she play in midfield? Really special player and very exciting signing. So we got 2 former WCC badasses in Kelsey Euler and Tori Zarenberg. After that game where she scored a hat trick against Gonzaga, yes, I will confess, I immediately sent a message to a few folks from USL Spokane that we need to sign her. A couple more players that we signed. Shay Collins, a fullback who played for LaSalle and James Madison. You can read about Shay as a player on USL Spokane's website. Maggie Johnston, a midfielder who played for Iowa. Both these players were very successful in college, Maggie Johnston especially. And when it comes to players that have not had any professional experience, I'm just going to be very wait and see. It's very difficult to find, as you'll recall from the previews that I did last year of all of our Zephyr players. It's tough to find film. I can't give like a really accurate assessment of these players. So I'm just going to wait till I actually get to see them play. Another player with some professional experience that we should be very excited about, Cam Tucker. Cam Tucker made 34 appearances across 3 NWSL teams. She's a forward. She was then signed by Levante in Spain's Liga F, which is the highest tier of women's soccer in Spain, but only appeared in 1 game for them. I think this player is a little bit, for me, reminiscent of like Taryn Reese. Taryn didn't play in the NWSL, but she had some experience in Europe and was really successful there. Taryn, like Cam Tucker, was also a really prolific college player. So it's like, can this player replicate some of the capability that they showed as college players as a professional? And that's a really big question mark sometimes. So these are just going to be the broad strokes about these players. And of course, I'll talk more about them before the season begins. And the last player I want to talk about is Olivia Vanderyacht. I think that's how you pronounce that. She actually has not been announced yet by the club, but her parent club, because she plays for Reign FC, have announced that she is going to Zephyr FC on a season-long loan. Olivia grew up in Kent, Washington. She won a WPSL championship with the Sounders women's team back in 2018. She went to the University of Washington, had 12 goals and 9 assists in her career there before being drafted by Seattle Reign in the 3rd round of the 2022 NWSL draft. She made 56 appearances for Reign and has now been loaned to Zephyr FC again until the end of the year. Very similar to what happened with Kenzie Weinert last year, as we'll recall. Kenzie was on loan from Reign until December, but then when that loan ended, she signed a permanent deal with Zephyr. So I have heard from some people that got in touch with me after that announcement was made that very good player and a really, really important signing in a position that I will just say was one of need. I think adding midfielders, especially midfielders that have the ability to contribute a lot in the playmaking side of things, and like finding like a proper 10 or a couple proper 10s, unless I hear differently, Thais Hayes has rehabilitated her ACL from her ACL injury and is still in the club. And she was going to be that player that could play in a 10 role last year for us. So really curious to see between Thais and Olivia van der Yacht and possibly Tori Zarenberg. I'm not sure if Tori can play or she's expected to play on the wing, but these are some players that we can expect some attacking returns from. So super excited about these signings, not going to lie. But that's only 6 players that have been announced so far. I would expect there would be another 5 or 6 if I do the quick math on the departures and the 6 players that have been announced. That would mean that there's probably going to be at least 5 or 6 more players that Zephyr FC are going to announce in the coming weeks. So much more updates about Zephyr FC to come soon. I know everybody wants updates on the head coach situation. The truth is, I don't have an update. I've asked USL Spokane, and they have just said they're in the process of reviewing potential hires, and that until then, Josh McAllister, who is one of the more respected coaches and performance folks throughout the USL Super League, will be the head coach until they make an announcement otherwise. And that's the only update I have right now. And of course, the moment I hear anything, you're going to hear it from me the next day, probably the next minute. All right, that's going to do it for the show for now. I just wanted to get some updates out to everybody. It's been a minute. I haven't done a podcast since, when was that? I think it was the 18th of June. I spent a lot of time on that other podcast, admittedly. So I hope for all of you that showed up to the Magic Lantern, you enjoyed that. That podcast is called All Those Moments. You can check it out on Instagram. I would love your support. If you think I'm any good talking about soccer, I probably know 10 times more about movies than I do about soccer. Is that a weird thing to say? Anyway, I will see you all on July 26th when Velocity FC hosts Sacramento Republic at 7 p.m. at One Stadium. And until then, thank you all for listening.